Everyone, and welcome to episode 28 of Unfolding Geopolitics. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Nayanima Basu. She is our Adjunct Fellow, and she brings over 2 decades of newsroom experience and has worked extensively in journalism. I would also like to highlight that Nayanima was one of the few female reporters in Bangladesh reporting on the ground, which is truly remarkable, by the way. She was also on the ground in Afghanistan during Taliban takeover in August 2021. She's the author of the book The Fall of Kabul. Today we'll be unpacking her insights from her recent reporting in Bangladesh and discussing how the recent elections and the victory of Tarique Rahman could shape Bangladesh's future. So Nayanima, welcome and thank you so much for doing this with us.
Thank you so much, Ravina. It's always a pleasure to be with you on this.
Yeah. So let's start. So I'll start with the question about your recent visit to Bangladesh. So you visited just a week before the February 12 elections. What was the on-ground mood in Dhaka? I mean, were the people excited? Were they hopeful about the votings after 2024 uprising? Were they disillusional or unbothered? Any standout conversations you had or scenes that captured the public's mindset and your attention particularly?
Well, thank you for that question, Ravina. And as you are well aware, I was there in August 2024 also. That's when the student uprising had happened. And we saw how the Awami League government at that point of time was thrown out of power. And of course, their Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, she escaped and she came to India. Now,
Mm-hmm.
keeping all that aside, at that time, of course, the sentiment was hugely anti-India, which continues to be there, although that has become a lot of, it has entrenched a lot. But then, yes, this time the mood was quite upbeat. People were looking at having the elections, going for voting, and they knew that there will be some kind of change, a transformation happening. They were looking at creating, history, so to say. And we've heard so many times at that point of time from the interim government that was there in power that this is going to be a very new Bangladesh, a Bangladesh 2.0. So all that was there. However, having said that, yes, there was a lot of palpable tension as well, because people were
Mm-hmm.
thinking, what if there will be a kind of violence and all of that, because we did see in July 2024 onwards, and even much before, there were political violence going on, how people were killed, students were killed, innocent lives were lost. So of course there were tensions. However, this all turned out to be all good. The turnover was quite nice. The turnout of the voters, and of course the fact that people now are looking forward towards, I would say, stability more than anything else. But then, of course, it remains to be seen how the new BNP government steers this country forward.
Okay. So you talked about student uprising, and that was a major role they played last year. So how are the student organization and youth groups faring now? Are they satisfied with the outcomes in election? And do you sense any lingering frustration that could spark future protests, maybe?
Well, that's an interesting question. I would say, if one studies Bangladesh deeply, then one would know that the student political groups out there, they are extremely powerful and influential, and we saw what they can do in 2024. And that kind of revolutionary streak does remain. And the fact that students there have now gotten, especially the Jamaat-e-Islami backed student groups, political groups, are now there in some of the key universities out there, from Dhaka University to Rajshahi and others. So of course, that kind of revolutionary thought process discourse is very much there, and they are also going to make the government accountable for their demands, whatever they would need. Having said that, they are also aware that a lot of turmoil has already happened, so they would now look forward to having this government bringing some kind of stability, as I said, and also, of course, taking this country towards development. There has to be jobs creation happening. So all that is there. But then the students are, it's not that they have given up, on protesting or things like that. Let us not forget the Osman Hadi episode that had happened.
Yeah.
They would want that, chapter to be also closed. So all that is there. like any other country, you have your internal tensions going on. So yes, the students remain powerful out there, the student political groups, and we will see sporadic incidents happening, protests taking place. But let's see how that goes. It's all too early for us to analyze, what will be the future of Bangladesh be like.
Okay. Uh, Related to this, Tarique Rahman was in exile for 17 years and he recently returned, and now he is the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. And also, BNP had a landslide victory. So, how is he generally viewed by the ordinary people? Do they see him as a fresh hope for change, or a continuation of dynastic politics, or maybe something else? What are people's main expectations from him, from his leadership, and how is he geopolitically being viewed?
Well, as you said, that this is all about dynastic politics, and I think he really rode on the wave of the fact that his father was the president and mother was the first female prime minister of that country. So, and people thought that this will be a safer option to go for than giving chance to Jamaat-e-Islami, who
Hmm.
which has been in power with BNP but in coalition, right? So handing over power to them solely was not an option that Bangladeshis were thinking. But yes, we need to also keep note of the fact that there has been a major resurgence for the Bangladesh Jamaat-e-Islami party, the way they have come forward and the way they have entrenched themselves across the society in Bangladesh. Having said that, the fact that Tarique Rahman, he won and he got such a landslide victory is because people trust him a lot. And they also feel that probably since he comes from that political family, maybe he will be able to take this country forward. And there was this kind of thought process also there, that okay, after two female prime ministers, let us also have another male prime minister, so to say. But let us also see, look into the fact that how he has done his campaigning, which has been quite structured, and I would say done in a very corporate like manner. He targeted those audiences where he thought that he probably will not do well, so he's addressed the rural communities more than staying only in Dhaka, which is the capital. But then again, there was a strong opposition also coming from Jamaat, so it was an interesting fight, so to say. And the Jamaat is also going to be a very strong opposition, as what their chief, Dr. Shafiqur Rahman, has talked about. Having said that, let us also not forget that there is a referendum lying. Voting on referendum had also taken place parallelly along with the election. So there is going to be a change in the governance structure of Bangladesh, and it remains to be seen how he overcomes that challenge. So he sees for him the task ahead is extremely difficult. But having said that, to answer your question simply, people really of Bangladesh, they have put in a lot of faith in him. And I'm sure some of the steps that we are seeing he's taken initially, he is also looking forward, and he's also going to bring in a lot of changes in Bangladesh. And geopolitically, yes, for India, I would say, being the closest and the largest neighbor for them, uh, I think for India, this is also a new Bangladesh that it will be dealing with. Bangladesh is also aware that this is a very different India, and I think I can only speak on India's behalf. The fact that we need to understand that this is not the Bangladesh that we've been viewing, or probably thought of viewing, and we have been viewing since 71. This is a new Bangladesh, and this is a new generation of politicians. Although BNP is a legacy party, but we need to understand that they need change, they want a change, and so they should have their own sovereign rights to carry on with their foreign policy. Having said that, what I really mean is the fact that if tomorrow Bangladesh is seen getting closer to China, India needs to live with that fact. Or maybe they probably would like to renew their ties with Pakistan. India needs to live with that fact. But India needs to also see that how it can steer ahead with its own neighborhood first policy, and see to it that Bangladesh remains a friend for us.
All right. So you mentioned that uh, that Bangladesh can be lean towards China or Pakistan. But what are Tarique Rahman's views on that? I mean, is he more pro-China or pro-Pakistan or pro-India? Where does he really want to work his relations with?
Well, again, that's these are early days, and we really cannot say where they will steer their foreign policy towards. But then, if you see, they have said in their manifesto that they will be friends to all and they'll be enemy to none. So that is also something that the Awami League government also had followed. Having said that, again, as I said, that this is a very new Bangladesh, and they might like to, of course, be more strategically closer to China. And of course, also with India, with both these countries would also want to have a working relationship with Bangladesh. But then again, we've seen how India has, made its outreach with Tarique Rahman, and the fact that he's also welcomed India's kind of outreach, and we've seen how Dr. Jaishankar had gone there during Khaleda Zia's funeral. And also Prime Minister's invitation to new Prime Minister Tariq Rahman of Bangladesh to come and visit India. So again, all that would be played out very soon in the coming months, and we would know how things would shape up. But we've seen how BNP had been engaging with China as well. So and that is the reality today, and that's something that India also understands. And I'm sure accordingly we will shape our own foreign policy as far as Bangladesh is concerned.
So, do you think his position is stable for now? Or are there any potential challenges ahead, even though they had a very strong opposition?
Well, it's not even a month since they had their elections and the results came out. So let's see, probably, I mean, the way people have accepted, and the way, not just in Bangladesh, but the way countries around Bangladesh and globally, the results have been accepted, despite the fact that India said it was not inclusive since Awami League was not allowed to participate in the polls. Nevertheless, India has accepted those results. And so everybody is hoping that this is going to be a very different Bangladesh, which will have a very different foreign policy. So, in terms of stability, let's see how that works out. There is a very strong opposition. And as I said, there is going to be probably now a bicameral legislature. There is going to be changes in the power of the president and the prime minister, which is all given in the referendum. So all those will take time, probably 6 months to a year, maybe more than that. And that's when, we will come to know whether the stability is there at all or not.
Okay. And I would like to ask you this question on that Bangladesh has a legacy of powerful women, as you mentioned, Khalida Zia, her mother, his mother, and then Sheikh Hasina before during this. So, but in this election, the women's representation were historically low. Were there any prominent women candidates or any emerging voices standing out?
Well, there were many women individual candidates who, were kind of in the participating in the polls. Having said that, there are women cadres in Jamaat-e-Islami party and also in BNP. But of course, yes, the amount of, we saw women voters not coming out as much as was expected. That's also because these elections were taking place after a lot of violence that has happened there in 2024. And people were, in any case, they were quite fearful of the fact that there could be a lot of violence taking place on February 12th, the day the polls had taken place. So many women probably wanted to not go out of homes and take extra risk. But having said that, we saw women in rural areas were coming out in large numbers. Women were there in Dhaka, in places like Mirpur and all. There were special polling booths for women were also created. So all that had happened. But then again, this is a societal thing. There were, although there was heavy security that was deployed at that point of time, but there was also this scare that a lot of violence might take place because Awami League was not allowed to participate, and there were reports that they might create some tensions. I think that is the reason why women chose to stay indoors.
Okay. Speaking of violence, there was a lot of cases and concerns on the safety and rights of Hindus and Indians. Um, Do you think the situation now is better or worse or the same with Tarique Rahman and BNP in power? Do you expect any improvements?
Well, not really Indians, but yes, the attacks on minorities had been happening, especially from India's perspective. Yes, a lot of Hindus were being attacked. Having said that, we must not forget the fact that the Hindus there also constitute a large number of voters who voted for Awami League. And there had been several cases of local crime as well that had been happening, which probably in India we do not follow, and we've been only highlighting cases where Hindus getting attacked. Yes, that is a concern. Many Hindu families, members of the Hindu community there, have told me that they were concerned, and there are still concerns that minority safeguards are not really properly in place, and that needs to be there. But we also saw Prime Minister Tariq Rahman, when he gave his first address to the nation, he made it very clear that Bangladeshis will not be seen as a Muslim or Hindu or a Christian or a Buddhist. They will be all seen as Bangladeshis. So I think for him to say that in his very first address to the nation was a very big deal. And I think that gave a lot of assurance to the minority groups there. But it remains to be seen in terms of policy measures what comes out. But then let us not forget that while we in India, we would like to highlight and talk about it, going by my own experience, I've not seen any Hindu there talking about the fact that they would want India to save them. They really want, I mean, they also believe Bangladesh is their own country and they need the safeguards from their own government. So a lot of dynamics are at play there. And that is why we see, some of these violence taking place. But then the reality within that country, I think that is their internal matter, but they're also working on it. The very reason that why Prime Minister Rahman talked about it, I'm sure that is also one of their priority areas that they will be working on.
According to you, what steps could the new government take to address this? And there's also a lot of anti-India sentiment there. What can the new government do to build a trust amongst the community?
Well, I think trust works both ways when you talk about bilateral relationship, not just geopolitically, but otherwise also in life also trust works both ways. So I think India needs to also work a lot towards rebuilding the trust that these two countries had. And I think which is why we see now the visa resumption has started. I think the connectivity projects will again start. There has to be, India has to start the projects that were going on during Sheikh Hasina's era. So all that will be happening. And I'm sure Bangladesh is also aware that, it has to also work with India with a lot of professional attitude. And I think, again, these are very early days, but Bangladesh has talked about the fact that they will be prioritizing some of the areas like the river water sharing. Tista is a very big priority for them. And of course, the issue of border killings. All those they will be raising with India sooner than later when these two countries, when the leaders meet. And that's when we will see how things unravel. But as I said, building trust is not Bangladesh's own responsibility. That also is India's larger responsibility. Again, because what Bangladesh feels, and that is where the genesis of anti-India sentiment really has started, is the fact that Delhi has been, in the past decade or so, more than that, had been only dealing with Sheikh Hasina and Awami League. Yes, that was the government of the day, and yes, that was our priority. But having said that, I think somewhere down the line, India, probably did not do that outreach it should have done with the student political groups out there, with BNP, with Jamaat, which we see now is happening. We saw Foreign Secretary, when he went for the swearing in ceremony of Tarique Rahman, he reached out and he met the Jamaat-e-Islami chief, which I think was a very big step. And I think that is going to allay a lot of fears that India is not, again, putting all its egg in one basket. So again, coming to your question, trust will work both ways. So both these countries would now need to walk a very tightrope cautiously and see to it that sentiments don't get hurt. And there has to be more people to people linkages. I think we need to allow more Bangladeshi, artists, singers, painters to come and, to come to India. And of course, Indian businessmen should go there and invest. So I think all those discussions will happen. We need to wait and watch. I think the the turning point would be when these two leaders meet, when Prime Minister Narendra Modi will have a bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Tarique Rahman, and that's when we will see how the new chapter begins.
All right, that's a very interesting point, Nayanima. So I think you've covered most of the things which I was about to ask you, but what could be the roadmap for the next few years for India and Bangladesh? Since we had a very close relations with Bangladesh when Sheikh Hasina was in power, can we expect a relationship like that to build on, or will it be something else? What is your take on this?
Well, again, as I said, that whether the relationship will be as good as it was under Sheikh Hasina, again, remains to be seen how these two countries work together. But then this is again a very different Bangladesh, and Tarique Rahman is very much aware of the fact that there is this entrenched anti-India sentiment in the society now. So India needs to also work its way through all of that. But then in the coming months, as I said, let's see how these two leaders meet. And I think it is imperative for these two leaders to now go ahead and have a meeting, a bilateral meeting. Again, there will be questions whether Tariq Rahman will be going to China first in his first, visit abroad, or he comes to India first. But
Hmm.
even if he goes to China, I think we should not be too concerned. Rather, we should focus on some of the priority areas that we need to work on. Also, I think India is having this wait and watch scenario where there will be a lot of changes within their own governance structure. So all that will impact the relationship. But then whether it will be as good as it was under Sheikh Hasina, again, that depends what India, being the biggest neighbor for Bangladesh, what it does. I mean, I think the baby steps that we can take at this point of time, as I said, visa resumption has started. We should restart the projects as soon as possible. We should restart the connectivity projects and also go ahead with some of the promises that we've made them to Bangladesh when Sheikh Hasina was in power. And that is how you can gain the trust of the young generation there. We must not forget the demands that the young generation is expecting from India. We cannot be telling them constantly that, okay, this is it was India that got you independence in 1971. All that is history. They appreciate that history, but then they want their new identity to be also respected. And I think India knows that. It's very
Mhm.
much aware. So we need to also take a very different turn and take this relationship in a very different new road. It will require a lot of skillful diplomacy, and I'm sure our diplomats are aware about all that. We are going to very soon have a new high commissioner in Bangladesh. So I'm hoping that when that happens, and when these two leaders meet, Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Tariq Rahman, there will be some of the actionable points on which these two countries will be working, and that will tell us and signal to the world what shape and how healthy this relationship is going to be.
Hmm. All right, I see. So, what do you think India's priority is as of now with Bangladesh? Is it resolving anti-India sentiments, or is it, you already mentioned that we have resumed our visas, or is it the connectivity projects, or what is our number one priority as of now with
Well,
Bangladesh?
our priority, of course, has to be to see that our security concerns are also being taken care of by Bangladesh, and they have clearly stated that they will not allow any country to have to use Bangladesh, soil of Bangladesh, against India, and I'm sure that remains primary concern. Which is why India is concerned that what if tomorrow Bangladesh gets closer with China and Pakistan. So I think from India's perspective, security concerns are of utmost importance. But having said that, I don't think India should be looking through the lens of security interest only. It should do its work, bringing the neighbor, that is Bangladesh, and of course other neighbors as well, as much as possible, and do what it wants to do under the neighborhood first policy. And again, as I said, and sorry for repeating that again, we would see what will be our priority areas when these two leaders meet. But yes, we know for a fact that India would definitely expect Bangladesh to see to it that India's security interests are taken care of.
All right, we really hope that they have a bilateral meeting soon and they do resolve all of these problems. So, just to sum up whatever we have discussed, I think you said that it's a very different Bangladesh right now because now there's a new leadership and he was in exile for 17 years and people have put a lot of faith in him, even though he was in exile for a very long time. So, I think we can only foresee positive things, and his position is also very stable and very strong as of now. So let's see how it all turns up. And do you have anything else to say? Any conclusion? Anything you want to add up?
Well, as I said, and just, as you nicely summed it up, Ravina, the fact that for India now and for Indians at large, we should not really see Bangladesh from the perspective of how we have been viewing for all these years. And of course, now with West Bengal elections coming up and elections in Assam, we must also restrain the language that we use internally for our own domestic political gains, because this also creates a lot of tension across the border. We should
Mhm.
not be using the term Bangladeshi, it sounds like an insult. What
Right.
are some of our political leaders are doing, I think we need to keep a check on that, which is extremely important. And once we do that, I think again it's very important to get the sentiments right. And once that is there, once you have people's support and people are willing to uh, kind of have a working relationship with you, it makes easier for the government of the day to also have a good and cordial relationship with your neighbors, right? So I think the coming months with the state elections coming up in India, we need to ensure that happens. And that is very important, which we might not take it seriously. But in Bangladesh, they are very well aware and they are watching us constantly. So I think that is what I think is extremely important. And rest, of course, it's a G2G, the government to government relationship, and how that shapes up. And accordingly, the discourse will take place.
Wow, that is fascinating. Really great insights, Nayanima. We are so grateful for you uh, to join this podcast and sharing all your insights and your reportings from Bangladesh. Thank you so much, and we really would like to have another podcast with you. Thank you so much, Nayanima, for joining.
Thank you, Ravin, and thank you to Gateway House for having this podcast. Take care.